Good morning, Changemakers, and welcome to the Environmental Changemakers series brought to you by Environmental Scouts. Today's episode features two young changemakers, environmental activists Mackenzie Feldman and Aliza McHugh. Mackenzie is the co-founder of Herbicide-free Campus, and Aliza is their director of partnerships. Herbicide-free Campus is an amazing youth-led organization that supports groups of students who want to eliminate synthetic herbicide use on their campuses. I'm Dr. Adriana Glazner, co-founder of Environmental Scouts. If you haven't heard our origin story yet, you can tune into any of our previous Changemaker episodes to find out more. We proudly bring you this series to amplify the voices of real-life changemakers just like Mackenzie and Aliza. You can find out more on our social media. Facebook is at Environmental Scouts. Instagram is at EnviroScoutsLA. And you can always go to environmentalscouts.org to see previous episodes and actions that young changemakers can take to follow up on what they learned. Joining me is Environmental Scouts co-founder, Brooke, also my student, who I'm so proud of. Brooke, why do you think it's important to eliminate synthetic herbicides on our school campuses?
Because I think something's wrong when we can't trust the labels or things we buy on shelves. And I recently learned that glyphosate can cause cancer and that many schools use it. My neighbors spray it on their lawns, and I feel uneasy walking my dog, going to the park, or even hanging out in my school. I want to know what we can do to change that.
That's amazing. Well, Brooke, I'm happy to introduce you to Mackenzie and Aliza, and I think they're going to inspire young people like you and not as young people like me to see what we can do to get rid of synthetic herbicides. So without further ado, we have Herbicide Free Campus founder Mackenzie and Director of Partnerships Aliza. Take it away.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Yes, I'm Mackenzie Feldman. And I'm the founder and executive director of Herbicide Free Campus, and I'll let Aliza introduce herself.
I'm Aliza. I'm also from Los Angeles, like you guys, and yeah, I'm the director of partnerships for Herbicide Free Campus.
Yeah, so, okay, we will get started with our presentation. Awesome. So our organization works to transition away from synthetics on campus, and we'll explain in the next slide what an herbicide is and all of these things. So if you're not familiar with pesticides and herbicides, basically side means to kill, right? So a pesticide is any chemical used to kill a pest. So a pest can be a weed, an insect, a fungus. That's why there's insecticides and herbicides to kill weeds and fungicides and all of that. And so our organization focuses on herbicides because herbicides are used to kill weeds, and that is what's predominantly sprayed in agriculture, and that's predominantly what's sprayed on campuses and parks and playgrounds and things like that. And so that's the mission of our organization. And before we get started with our origin story and things, we just felt like it's important to address, especially in this period that we're in right now, really thinking about this issue and who it affects the most, whether we're thinking about groundskeepers who are predominantly people of color or farm workers who are often undocumented. Like, the exposure falls hardest on people of color who are taking care of our grounds and picking our food. And it's important to remember this and to be always thinking about the people that it impacts. And I think too often in the toxins world, it's easy to just think of the chemicals themselves or, how they affect ecosystems. And our organization is really rooted in thinking about the people that it most impacts. And we'll talk about that a bit later, but that's just something that we want to make sure people understand. All right, so this all started because me and my teammate, Bridget Gustafson, who's in that photo, we played beach volleyball at the University of California, Berkeley. And one day we showed up to practice, and I was a junior and Bridget was a freshman. And our coach said, if the ball rolls off the court, just let it go. And herbicide was sprayed everywhere around the court. And I was familiar with herbicides because where I'm from in Hawaii is ground zero for pesticide testing. And they do all the GMO seed corn testing there before these seeds are shipped to the mainland. And so they're spraying a ton of different pesticides and herbicides. And I've seen the impacts that this has on people in the community. And it's caused, Hawaii has 10 times the rate of birth defects. And there's these cancer clusters of people that live right near the testing facilities that were getting sick. And so in high school, I was kind of introduced to this movement and followed the activists that were trying to get GMOs banned from Hawaii and stuff. So anyways, when I came to college and this happened at the courts, it was something that I was familiar with. And I said, oh, herbicides, that doesn't sound good. Where we're, women in reproductive age with skin exposed, seems borderline criminal to be spraying herbicides around where we're practicing. And my friend Bridget felt the same way. And so we asked our coach, what can you get us in touch with the person who was spraying? She introduced us to the athletics grounds manager, and we talked with him, and we came with we found out before the meeting that he was spraying Roundup, or he was spraying Ranger Pro, but the active ingredient is glyphosate, just like Roundup. And we came with a bunch of papers, like how Brooke said, glyphosate causes cancer. It's a probable carcinogen. So we came with all of these papers. It had just been when the World Health Organization had declared glyphosate a probable carcinogen. And we said, this is bad. Why are you spraying this? And he was actually really willing to listen. And he said, I totally agree with you. I just don't have the people power to pick the weeds. And so if your team wants to do it, that's great. And I will just stop spraying. And it was a really it was a really interesting moment, and we were surprised how easy it could actually be. All of a sudden, at the end of this meeting, we got herbicides banned from the court. And since then, our team started to pick the weeds before practice. And me and Bridget felt, after doing a little bit of research, we found out that they were spraying this all over campus. And we said, why don't we extend this to a campaign, to a club on campus? And I wrote this article in the school paper that says, you can see it here, banning UC Berkeley's use of herbicides from courts to campus is a must. And I got a ton of community support and student support. And we both realized, wow, this is something that people care about. And maybe they just didn't know that this was being sprayed. I never would have thought that. You just assume that these grasses are safe. And so from this moment, Herbicide-free Campus, Herbicide-free Cal was born, and we worked at UC Berkeley to get herbicides banned. And it's still not fully banned, but we got glyphosate banned from the campus, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we are able to bring in an organic land care specialist to train all of our groundskeepers to go organic. And so the largest green spaces on campus transitioned to organic. And since then, we've probably done about 30 or 40 work days. And like I said in the beginning, right, it's important to connect with the people who are spraying it, because it's easy to think that they're bad people because they're spraying these chemicals. But in reality, they're the ones that are the most exposed. And so we need to make sure we're not just complaining about the problem, but we're coming to them with a solution to help. And so in these photos, you can see some of the work days we've done, and it's just been a really cool experience to get to know the groundskeepers, and it's been an honor for them to let us, come and help them mulch and pick weeds, and in return, they don't have to spray in those areas anymore. And here on the left, you can see that's our chancellor, basically the equivalent of like the university president. And on the far right is Theron, who's the grounds manager at UC Berkeley. So he's in charge of all the land and decides what gets sprayed. And so it was a really cool moment because they came to our presentation about Herbicide-free Cal and what we were able to do. And it was cool to be able to have that kind of recognition from someone who's so high up at the university, and also the person who's the decision maker on what's being sprayed. And Theron has been, so awesome and really willing to transition the campus. And on the far right, you can see when you're in the process of transitioning away from chemicals to organic, you have to block it off for a certain amount of time so that the soil is able to go through the process of aeration and overseeding and compost tea and build microbial life back in the soil, because basically when you're spraying, you kill the weeds, but you also kill the soil. And the way to not spray is to make the soil, build the soil health and make the soil so healthy that it outcompetes the weeds. And so that's what's happening on campus. So it's just really cool to walk by and to know that our student group was able to make that change. And kind of like I said before, so after we were able to do this, the student group was going strong, and I graduated. Me and Aliza both graduated in 2018 from Berkeley, and I attended the Johnson versus Monsanto trial, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. But basically, it was a groundskeeper who sued Monsanto, and he got cancer, and he believed it was because of the chemical that he was exposed to, which is glyphosate, Ranger Pro, actually, the same thing that they were spraying at our courts. And I went to the trial to hear his story and to learn about this, and was so inspired and decided that I needed to continue this work, and figure out a way to make this my job after I graduated, because it just seemed too important not to do. And, if I could prevent someone from going through what he was going through and dying of cancer, then that just felt like a responsibility that I needed to do. And so decided to expand the campaign to Herbicide-free UC. It's gone through a couple of name changes now. So it went from Herbicide-free Cal to Herbicide-free UC, and we started the student group at 5 other UC campuses and really pushed the UC system, to go all organic by 2025. And we're still pushing that, but we did get them to ban glyphosate on all 10 of their campuses, which is a huge victory. And you can see on the left, we've had so many students go to the regents meetings and speak. The picture on the left corner is actually a doctor at UCSF, and she gave a testimony. And you can just see, like on the right, we had our action alert, and we got a petition of over 14,000 people to sign. We delivered it to the president's office. We've done a bunch of emails and speeches and things like that. And it's been really cool to kind of to galvanize students and to realize, students have so much power to make change. And students, Brooke, just like students are the ones that are on campus, and they deserve to not only know what is sprayed, but to be able to have a say in what they're exposed to and to be able to do something about it. So, like I said, Johnson versus Monsanto, this is the groundskeeper, Lee Johnson, who was exposed to glyphosate on his job as a groundskeeper. And on the far right, we actually brought him to Berkeley for his first public appearance in the US. The trial was a really big deal because he ended up winning, and he won $289 million, which was later reduced to $79 million. And then it's currently in appeal. He won the appeal, but it'll probably be appealed again. We don't really know. We're still following everything. And since then, over 100,000 people have sued. And so far, there's been 2 other cases that have happened since Lee Johnson. And in the third one, it was a couple, and they each won $1 billion for being exposed to Roundup. And it's not only that glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, it's not only that causes cancer, but the fact that they don't have any warning labels on it, and the fact that they were able to prove that the company knew it caused cancer but didn't warn people about it. And even to this day, it's still sold in Lowe's and Home Depot and places like that. And so, on the far right, it was really cool to have Lee come and tell his story. And he's amazing because he's not only accidentally fell into this role as an activist or really a hero in the environmental movement, but he's using his platform to make change. And we've partnered with him on a lot of different things. And he, came to talk to the students. So you can just see in this video now a little bit about his experience.
The people who trained you in using it,
yeah,
what did they tell you about the safety?
They said it's safe enough to drink. They said you can wear PPE if you need to, or if you think you should, or if you don't need to, it's okay as long as you shower after.
Sorry, safe enough to drink?
Oh, yeah. I heard that more than once, safe enough to drink.
Lee Johnson didn't take any chances, though. He always wore his PPE, personal protective equipment, when he was killing weeds here at Benicia High School, north of San Francisco, where he worked as a groundsman between 2012 and 2015. This is just one of the schools where you used to spray.
This is actually the hill that I was spraying when my biggest exposure happened.
Or when the hose broke.
Yeah, when the hose broke.
This school now only holds bad memories for Lee after he was drenched in Roundup when the hose broke. When you had that malfunction here on the hill, it just washed inside your suit.
I had on my Tyvek suit, which has a little lapel right up here, collar. So it got down in the lapel, it got down in the collar, it got down on there in my face, everywhere on my neck. So after I took off the Tyvek suit, my work shirt was wet and everything was wet.
Soaked in it?
Yeah, soaked in it down to my skin.
You were covered in poison, effectively, but you still thought that was okay.
You're right, because I got it on me a lot. I got it on me all the time. Every morning that I was spraying, I always get the drift, I always get a little bit on my cheeks, on my forehead, because I only can have so much coverage.
Just like we talked about, you know, it's Lee's story is really important because, like we said, it's so easy to just kind of like think of these chemicals in the abstract. And when you actually see a real person who's exposed, you know, he's one of so many, but his story is really powerful because it really brings this human component to it. And really, he's the advisor for Herbicide Free Campus. And we've learned a lot from him of just, you know, how you talk to other groundskeepers about this and, you know, just really, really centering in on that human aspect. I don't know if you have more to say about that, Aliza.
Well, did you mention that when you went to the trial, you like kind of the idea for sticking through with this was kind of from that trial, like the idea of continuing the work and, you know, pushing, like making sure that other groundskeepers don't have to go through this or other people doing it. So finding that connection with a person is really important because we all have groundskeepers at all the schools we've always gone to, and they're the ones that are, you know, closely related to these chemicals and are often told it's not harmful for them or they're not given proper protective gear. Lee was in charge of basically all elementary, middle schools and high schools in the area. So the school districts that many of us have gone to. So it's definitely a problem that that we hope to fix with our work.
Yeah. And basically what happened, how we got connected to him was, so I went to the trial and then I was really inspired when he was talking, and I knew, you know, all my colleagues and activist friends in Hawaii were watching this because we knew that this would have, you know, ripple effects all over the world. And when the Monsanto lawyer was talking, I was just like, I can't listen to this right now. Like, this is crazy. And so I just wrote Lee a note and then gave it to the lawyer who was sitting in front of me and asked him if he could pass it to Lee. And it basically just said, you know, you're so inspiring. This is what we did at Berkeley. We want to keep doing this because of people like you. And so he gave the note to Lee, and then I could see Lee reading it and kind of like looking back at like, who is this person? And then after the trial, he was like, I'm going to email you, you know, thank you for writing me that note. And then he emailed me and said, you know, how can I get involved with what you guys are doing? Which was just crazy. And since then, haven't looked back, just been continuing to fight the fight with him. And, you know, today he's still alive. He's lived longer than a lot of doctors and people have predicted. And I think a lot of it is because he just like has no hate in his heart for the company or what happened to him. And he's like such a good person and just wants to you know, use this opportunity to do good work. And so I think, you know, his health obviously like goes up and down day to day, but he's still fighting. So it's just a really amazing inspiration. And if you haven't heard of him before, check it out. There's a really cool article in Time magazine about him. And if you just Google Dwayne Lee Johnson, you'll find a lot of stuff on him and his story. But basically, like I said, you know, Hawaii is ground zero for pesticide testing and all of these things. And we had the idea of bringing Lee and his family to Hawaii to not only maybe talk to groundskeepers and set up meetings, but also just have a chance for his family to have vacation since he's going through this really hard time. And so we did that exactly a year ago, and it was amazing. We went to 4 different islands. Herbicide Free Campus partnered with the Protect Our Keiki Coalition, which is a group of nonprofits in Hawaii. and all over the country, actually. And we brought Lee and his family, and we had meetings with the Board of Education and the Parks and Rec and all these different grounds people. And by the end of the trip, in our last meeting with the Board of Education, Lee told his story, and they were convinced, and they ended up banning all herbicides from every public school in the state of Hawaii, which was incredible. And you'll see a photo of that in one of the next slides.
Awesome. So this is a map of where we are in Herbicide-free Campus campaigns now. We're currently in 15 universities, and we're working this fall semester to bring on 5 universities. And we also piloted a program this summer with 4 different high school students across the country, which was super exciting, figuring out how they navigate the process of learning about what herbicides are on their campuses, speaking to the decision makers, because a lot of the times many different people make decisions that are going to go into this opinion of whether herbicides or whether a certain herbicide gets banned on campuses. So when I came in October of last year, we were solely in the University of California school system, but Mackenzie had been getting a lot of interest from other students who were wanting to bring these to their campuses, because we feel as former students, university students, if you study environmental causes, you're constantly in these classes where you're learning about the destruction of the environment and human health hazards, and how that kind of goes hand in hand basically with upcoming and existing climate change. And so we were really, I feel really lucky to have found this work. And I think a lot of students feel the same, in that we're able to actually have an actionable item to help combat climate change and help our communities simultaneously. And so all these students on this map right here have kind of done similar things. And it's really exciting just to see it spread and see different student interests across the country, and also just see advisors at campuses. Yeah, so as I said, we're in 18 schools in 10 states. We have 5 different staff, and we're adding a 6th, which is really exciting. And then we have launched a high school program, and the model really is we do a fellowship where we pay each fellow who wants to join the campaign to kind of come and be coached by a campus coach, who's either me, Mackenzie, and all of our other staff. Also, as nonprofit organizers, we also kind of function as campus coaches for all the students, and we do training. So we have hosted trainings with experts on social media, on writing op-eds, on direct action organizing, on the history of pesticides. We just did a training on environmental racism and pesticide usage, and how that contributes to COVID exacerbation and climate change. And so we're really, really interested in all of these students who really want to be environmental advocates and need creative solutions to that, but you often need structure in those creative solutions. So Mackenzie and the team have worked really hard to create this amazing toolkit that all the students work using to kind of show how to email your like board of supervisors, how to email the faculty, how to email the groundskeepers, how to email how to call people and ask questions and see what's actually going on your campus, so then you can figure out what to do about it. So yeah, and we're also working on a ton of research projects that run from figuring out how changing your land to organic can, save water usage, or research on the existing history of pesticide usage in your area. The University of California school system also serves to be a big research hub for agriculture in the whole state and often the whole country. And so we want to figure out how to investigate and figure out what's going on in their research regarding herbicides and how we can play a role in that as herbicide-free activists. Yeah, and so this is one of our a page basically of different authored pieces by our students. So you see students at Emory, students at Davis, students at Berkeley, and just the kind of traction students have been able to get where they're coached on how to write in a certain way, or how to speak their opinion to a larger group. And so we really encourage the use of word, basically, and learning how to writing and speaking up in your community and trying to get anything published in your local paper, school newspaper, regional newspaper, or national newspaper is definitely a goal of ours one day. And we've seen a lot of interest from people who really want to highlight youth voices in this movement. A lot of the time, the toxic prevention work has been done by older generations. And so Mackenzie has said to me, she's like, I'm often the youngest person in the room at all the conferences, at all the speaking events. And so it's really awesome to have students who are on board and wanting to kind of, target pesticides as a way to speak to how they feel about the environment, that things shouldn't be there without their consent. And often that's the way that works in the United States is chemicals can be produced and used without proving that it causes human harm. You have to prove that afterwards. And another thing is why Mackenzie mentioned this earlier, but Herbicide Free Campus is really focused on the human health aspect of chemical usage. And a lot of groups solely focus on pollinators like bees and monarchs. And we also partner with all those groups as well, but our kind of main focus is on student and community health.
Yeah, so, and can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. One thing that we were able to do earlier this year was partner with other groups like Non-Toxic Communities, which focuses, we focus on schools, and they focus on public spaces and parks and cities and municipalities. And so we partnered with groups like theirs and a couple of others to bring the Organic Land Care Project. And one crazy thing about this work is that this man on the right, Chip Osborne, he is kind of the organic land care guru. And when a city or a school or a park wants to go organic, it's literally, for some reason, Chip is the person. He knows what to do. And so Chip, before COVID happened, before, we were unable to travel as much, Chip was, being sent all over the country, managing 50 cities. He came to Berkeley, trained all of our groundskeepers on how to go organic. And, we thought, this is crazy. This is one person. We really need to be able to teach other people this work so that other people can train people. So we formed the Organic Land Care Project. And this was a training that he was giving in Petaluma. And it was really cool. We had groundskeepers from all over the place come, and he did another one in LA, and our UCLA groundskeepers that we work with showed up to that. And now, when COVID happened, he was able to transfer all of his stuff online. So if you're interested, if you're watching this and you manage land and you're interested in learning how to do that without the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, check out the Organic Land Care Project. We have a bunch of free resources. So that was a cool thing to come together with these other groups. And one thing that I think is often missing from the climate conversation is the use of pesticides. We talk a lot about fossil fuels and oil and gas and fracking, but I think a lot of the times we're not talking about pesticides and how that contributes to climate change. And so this is just a graphic that one of our students that started this campaign at UC Santa Barbara made on the right. And just to give a little quick background, pesticides are fossil fuel derived. They're made from petroleum. Fertilizers are made from fossil fuels, and the production of making all of these things also requires fossil fuels. Not only that, but when we like I said earlier, when we put pesticides into the soil, we are killing the soil biology when soil actually has the potential to sequester carbon. And so what you hear a lot about regenerative farming, that's what they're talking about is bringing carbon and trapping it into the ground. And the same thing can be said for parks and for huge green spaces on campuses. And so I think that we are working on trying to get this to be more of a general understanding with the public and more into the mainstream climate conversation with the activists that are talking about climate change. And so, and also when you build healthy soil, you're able to save water and make your whole grounds more resilient. So these are just a few ways that pesticides and climate tie together.
So this is part of a presentation we did last week for our high school students and college students. And we've found that if you're familiar with environmental racism, which is kind of how race as a structure in our society has kind of created inequalities, and specifically where you live and what you're exposed to. That's the environmental factor. So for example, I live in Los Angeles, and in certain areas that are considered low income, there are a ton of oil rigs, and the communities placed next to those oil refineries or oil rigs have a higher chronic illness, higher rates of cancer among children, and it's completely unequal across the board in Los Angeles. Knowing that living next to these oil refineries is what's really harmful for these people. So similar thing happens in areas where people are planted next to or live next to chemical and industrial plants. So you'll see in the photo in the top right is an area called Cancer Alley in Louisiana, where areas of towns are located next to chemical and industrial plants. So they endure more pollution than their white neighbors, and usually chronic illness and higher rates of cancer and different forms of cancer that are unusual for their lineage, depending on where they live. So yeah, what's also on here, Black people are more than 3 times likely to die from airborne pollution. BIPOC and are more burdened with chronic diseases, disinvested community with poor food options, pollution site, poison air and water. And then Mackenzie mentioned before, farm worker rights. Like a lot of the times the farmers themselves are not going to be exposed to these chemicals as much as the farm workers who are directly working with the produce, and also, might not have the same health benefits, and now if they've been exposed to chemicals like pesticides or herbicides that are known to weaken your respiratory system, you have a higher chance of being significantly impacted by COVID-19, which causes a respiratory illness as well. And so our goal as Herbicide-free Campus is really, we're working within these microcosms of campus, but the goal is really to create a ripple effect across your community that then it's showing that different states, different cities, hopefully the country cares about human health enough to kind of ban these chemicals and kind of consider alternatives. Many countries in Europe have already banned glyphosate and hope to ban other chemicals and usually have a way more rigorous review process. But in the United States, as you might be aware of, we're really beholden to corporations. And so the corporations like Monsanto and Bayer and Dow and DuPont that are responsible for and they've all bought each other and now conglomerated. So they're really, really powerful. They will pay the universities to do certain research that proves that their chemicals are not poisonous, and they pay farmers to make sure they continue using their products and make sure that that's the only product they can use that's going to ensure them beneficial crops. So we're really looking to take down that kind of corporate power at these universities and speak up and show that citizens and students have a voice. Next slide. Yeah, and this was this is a report called Poison Parks that was done by a research institution in New York City, where they are trying to ban glyphosate usage at public parks. And this is a quote here that I can read. "No one should be needlessly exposed to chemicals like glyphosate that may cause cancer and other health problems. It's especially troubling that communities of color who are already at serious risk from chemicals in their environment are the most likely to suffer from exposures to this dangerous pesticide. The state must take the lead in protecting all Californians from glyphosate." So while she mentions Californians, because Californians have done quite a bit of action on glyphosate, it definitely applies to the whole country, where Roundup is a common thing in people's shelves at home or at schools. And we're really working to change that and also just create a different conversation about why are weeds harmful? Weeds in public places should not be considered harmful, in parks, in schools, in playgrounds. It's totally just an aesthetic appeal for people needing to keep those really manicured lawns that we maybe all grew up looking at, and also causes a lot of water loss as well, trying to keep these grounds green for people even in droughts in California.
Yeah. And do you want to talk a little bit about our regional focus and how we're getting students engaged?
So my job as director of partnerships and is just to help the students really connect to other groups across the country that are doing this. So we've worked with other community groups across the country in trying to plug students into the regional areas there. So if you come from an area where there isn't a group that's focused on this work, you can start it, or you can help support a bill they're trying to pass in in their community. So we've been able to do that in New York, and we're hoping to be able to do that where other students are around. But yeah, if you're interested, there are a bunch of cities and municipalities maybe near you that have completely banned chemicals and transitioned to organic because they believe it's important for the health of their communities.
Yeah, this is just a quote I love to put on presentations because I think, you know, we grow up as students, we have no idea the power that we have. And I think it really just took us asking these questions and offering to help, and we were able to make like such a big change. And so just want, you know, young people or any age who are listening to this to know that like we do all have so much power to make change.
Yeah, so this is basically, if you want to get involved in this in any capacity, we have tons of ways to do so. So the first thing, you can just find out what's being sprayed in your community and bring it up to a group like us or a group like Non-Toxic Communities. There's a bunch of organizations we can help support you with depending on where you are. Starting a petition based on that knowledge of what's being sprayed and bringing that to the decision makers at your school. And then you can also, if you're a high school or college student, email us at hello@Herbicide-free Campus to apply to be a campus fellow and bring this to your campus and this kind of idea of that you can make a difference and find out what's happening.
Awesome. And then, yeah, just the last bit, we are doing right now, we actually just launched today, it is live, a petition to get Roundup out of Home Depot and Lowe's. And so we can, share on this link, but it's basically just bit.ly/outwithroundup. And we would love you all to sign this petition. And that is it. Here's our contact info if you're interested in getting involved, and here's all of our social media and our website. And yeah, feel free to email us with any questions you've got. And I will stop sharing my screen now.
Awesome. Mackenzie, Aliza, honestly, every question I wrote down as you were talking, you answered within a few seconds. Who benefits from the use of herbicides? How does racial justice connect to this topic? What can young people do? And I think it really just speaks to the two of you and your organization being a really brilliant example of how structure and organization is the key. Even the way that you were organized and structured in your delivery. I was really struck by your use of the word power. I mean, that's really it, right? The powerful and the powerless. You said on your Instagram page that we can't fight to protect the health of people and the environment without fighting racial justice. And I think you gave us a really, a sneak peek of what that means in terms of, the exposure falling hardest on the people who are taking care of the grounds and picking our food, environmental racism. You talked about Cancer Alley. I think for just a moment, if we could address a little bit more to the young people, what they can do, how can they really consider racial justice and injustice as they address the climate emergency? What does that look like for someone as young as well? Sorry, that was a lot. I just got really excited.
I think I have an idea, but I mean, what we say to our students, and I think me as like a white person who's from like a privileged area, like our students are really lucky to go to universities, right? If you go to a university, you're really lucky to have gotten there and succeed in some capacity. So, right, as in that in itself, we have the power, we have the privilege to speak up and protect communities that don't have that privilege and that power. And so the students, your voice is kind of heard at a university, and your voice at your school should be really heard as well in the same capacity. If you're a student who goes there and you pay to go to that school, or you don't pay to go to that school, if you go to public school, you still have a role in representing that community. And so I think that when we're thinking about how universities are so powerful in our society in producing citizens that are then going to contribute back in terms of research or work or giving money back to the university, we really want to make sure that space is safe for everyone. And so it's the same thing can be said for your elementary school or middle school. Like you we think our parents have all the answers for so long, and then we get to the point and we're like, they didn't know. They were trying to help us in the best way, but, you know, maybe didn't have the way to speak to our environment or people that we don't know in our communities in the same way. So I feel like we have a huge responsibility as just people learning right here in this box of environmental scouts and people who are watching who care about this, to speak up for communities who are not going to be given that voice in the same way that we're going to be given that voice. And then the goal is to uplift those voices so everyone does have an equitable position of power.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I would add anything. I think that's all great. And I think when you think of the point of schools, it's to make a safe learning environment for students. And so if students have a problem with what's being sprayed on their campus and they take that up with the school and the school doesn't want to change, that's an issue, because you have this public facing image of being safe and healthy learning environment. So I just think, yeah, Brooke, it's amazing how young you are and how you already feel empowered and so knowledgeable about these things. And I think it's really inspiring. And, you know, if you can gather up your students, your fellow classmates for this kind of issue, for any issue you care about, and you can make change in your small place, I think it's really important to prove that you can make change in a small area, just like you've already done, and then be able to take that power of that group of people and lend it to the community. So kind of figuring out, okay, what's going on in my community? What about the people who don't, like Aliza said, don't have the time or the energy to put into this, or they're not listened to as much? How can we give those people a voice and lend our support?
Yeah, I'm so impressed with what you guys have done. It's just, like banning it from your school, we did a similar, but I don't really, I'm so impressed. And I also have a question. So it's, how do you think we could get the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to ban glyphosate from being bought altogether? How do you think we could do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually went to the EPA last year to present to them on what we're doing, and it was like 10 toxicologists, and I was with a group of people, doctors and farmers and stuff, telling them to ban glyphosate, and it was so scary. They were just all looking at us with just like blank stares, and you got to think that they also have families and children that they would want to protect. But and I think it's just like this administration in particular, it's definitely a lot harder. But my question to them was, why do we even have to do it this way and have this regulatory process of, they say that there's a regulatory process where they go through the studies and blah, blah, blah. But in the reality, a lot of these studies are industry funded, or they're not looking at the same, they're not looking at it the same way that like the European Union does. They're not following the precautionary principle where, let's assume all these chemicals are dangerous until they're proven safe, as opposed to in the US, we assume they're safe, and then we make these studies tell us that they are dangerous, and that could take so long and often isn't even done. And so my question to them was, why don't we follow the precautionary principle? And they said, you have to take that up the hill. That's something that has to be passed in Congress. And so the EPA doesn't really have power to change that. But, there's a lot of groups that are suing the EPA right now for allowing Roundup to be used. And so, you can join forces with groups like that and do testimonies and fill out petitions and things. And I think it's just a matter of time. But I think it's also fair to look at, the reality is, if we ban glyphosate, farmers are just going to use something that's even worse and more dangerous, like 2,4-D, dicamba. We see that already happening. And so I think while it's great to focus on banning a chemical, obviously, that causes cancer, we need to be focused on supporting legislation and things that are going to help farmers transition away from chemicals altogether. There's some really cool groups doing that, like Farmers Footprint. And, hopefully the Farm Bill, we can fight for better changes in the Farm Bill that can support these types of things. I don't know, Aliza, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention as well. It's kind of this whole cycle where if one thing is banned, another thing will be brought up because it's going to make these companies so much money. It's unbelievable the amount of money they will make off of one chemical. And so banning that chemical is really devastating to their business essentially. So this just last month, they Monsanto and Bayer lost a lawsuit for $10 billion. So they're going to pay people $10 billion because their chemical was dangerous to these people who are farmers and homeowners and landowners and workers, and still will not label their product as cancerous. So you know how if you've ever seen the boxes of cigarettes that are they'll have really really big, this is a dangerous, tobacco is really dangerous, or it'll have harmful photos on it. Does not have to be done the same way on these chemicals. And the tobacco industry similarly fought for years to prevent that kind of labeling with a lot of money against groups like us, or grassroots groups who are trying to fight these tobacco usage. So it's kind of a similar story in that. And it's honestly pretty sad that US citizens have to kind of fight this way for people to recognize that this stuff is harmful to you. So, yeah, we just want to fight it in any capacity. And that means uplifting groups that are doing similar work to us, and finding other youth organizations that are really passionate in the same way. And our dream is to really create a coalition with other young student groups that are kind of fighting in this way and kind of come up with collaborative strategy together to figure out how to bring things to the EPA and how to get people to listen to students more so than they listen to people with maybe more degrees and more years, but maybe less passion and experience.
Yeah.
Aliza, Mackenzie, are all of your Herbicide-free Campus doctors at the college level?
So we're at 15 colleges, and then 4 high schools, which we just launched this summer. So, and then we also had we have a 5th grade class in Sacramento Unified School District that has taken this on and is working with their supervisor. So we're open to students of all ages. We've just learned kind of how to do it at the college level. And so we're learning how this can be done at the high school level, but really any age that if you're a student and you're interested in this, you should contact us and we can figure out how to work together.
I do know a really cool 5th grader that you probably get. You might be on the screen right now. So as we wrap up today, if you want to know more about Herbicide Free Campus and you want to really see how these young people have taken speaking up and coupled it with action from the very beginning, the example that they gave of talking to the groundskeeper, followed by actually picking the weeds, right? These are the kind of people we're talking about, people that have ideas, but follow it with action and service. If you want to know more about that, you can check them out on Instagram at Herbicide Free Campus, and on Facebook, it's Herbicide Free Campus. I also think it's worth bringing up the Organic Land Care Project that they mentioned, which is olcproject.com. We really value the synergy between groups. That's really important to us here at Environmental Scouts, and I think that it sounds like we share that value system. So any final words for us, ladies?
Just go on. If people don't want weeds, go pick them. It's really fun to work with your friends and family. You can do it in masks and social distancing. A lot of our students are still doing that on their campuses. So if a campus says we don't want the weeds there, that's why we spray, just say, okay, I'll get 10 people together and we'll go pick the weeds. And it takes a couple hours and the students do it. And when they're out there, they get a lot of attention from other students that are walking by. So it's a really awesome way to, get your hands dirty metaphorically and literally, and just, practice what you preach kind of. So it's really, it's awesome.
Convince them that dandelions are better than cancer. And yeah, go to our website, it's herbicidefreecampus.org. Maybe we can put the link up there one more time. So check us out. And if you're interested in supporting in any way, shoot us a note. You can also donate on our website. It only costs $500 per semester for this to be launched at a new school. So if you're watching this and you even have $5 or whatever, we can bring this to a new school. And there's students all over the country that email us every day but we just need to be able to build that capacity to train all of them. So,
okay. And when you go to Instagram, you'll notice as soon as you type in @Herbicide Free, the other chapters start to pop up. So follow them too.
Thank you so much for having us, and Brooke, let's definitely talk so we can get this going at your school.
Okay. And Brooke, I'll meet you at the park to pick some weeds. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.